Hello.
Hi, Kara.
Sorry, now I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now. Okay.
Super.
Thanks for agreeing to do this.
It is my pleasure.
Hi, Angela.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Thanks
How
for
are you?
agreeing to this. Good.
And where are you, Angela? Physically?
How do I do this? Officially, I work in Seattle, but I recently relocated due to family reasons in North Carolina. So just outside of now.
Right. You're breaking up, just to let you know. It might well be that you need to turn your video off to talk.
I see.
Hi, colleagues.
Hey, John.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Hi, Angela. Hi, Erin. Hi, Kara. And hi, Ty.
Hi, all. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. So it's 9 o'clock. So if you'd like, we can get started or we can wait for a few more people. Angela, it's completely up to you. We have about 29 people on the line right now.
Okay, let's maybe do a 2 minutes wait, see if we get a few more people and then we can start.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Looks like a few more people joined. Maybe we can go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. Perfect. So hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for registering for today's webinar, Getting Your First Grant as an Early Career Health Economist, hosted by the Early Career Researcher Special Interest Group and the Capacity Strengthening in LMIC's initiative. My name is Daniel Rotella, and I'm the Association Manager for iHea's activities. And I just want to say thank you again for registering. I know we have people from all over, so it's very exciting to have people attending. Thank you to our speakers for taking the time to be a part of this. It'll be very much appreciated. A few notes before we begin today's webinar. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes and will be recorded and uploaded onto our website afterwards. Before we begin, I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping items. If you experience any technical issues at all, please use the chat box and I will do my best to help you out. In order to eliminate some of those technical difficulties, I've asked that everyone has remained on mute. If you find yourself not on mute, please go ahead and mute yourself. This is to eliminate background noise for the speakers. In an effort to eliminate background noise, also, if you can keep your camera off or that kind of stuff, just to eliminate distraction, that will help as well. And I will now pass it on to Angela Micah, who will introduce today's speakers.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your location. I'm delighted that you chose to join this webinar on getting your first grant funding. I am Angela Micah and one of the conveners of the Early Career Researchers Special Interest Group. I'll be your moderator for this webinar. One of the biggest hurdles early career researchers face is being able to secure independent funding for their work initially. Our panelists today have a wealth of experience successfully navigating this hurdle. So we are delighted that they have agreed to share pointers on how we can secure coveted grant funding. Each presenter will have about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll have our Q&A time before we wrap up. So please put your questions in the chat as they come up, as Daniel said. I'll be sure to get them answered at the end. Our first presenter is Professor Aaron Stumpf. Professor Aaron Stumpf is currently Associate Professor at McGill University in the Department of Economics and the Department of Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Occupational Health. She's a William Dawson Scholar at McGill, and her research areas include health services research, equity, and the evaluation of policy and clinical interventions. She Boussier Career Awards from the Fonds de Research du Québec Santé and has received 9 major research grants as principal or co-principal investigator from the Canadian Institute for Health Research. Our second presenter is Professor Kara Hansen. Professor Kara Hansen is currently Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Public Health and Policy at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She was the founding director of the Center for Health Economics in London. Her research focuses on health systems, health financing, economic evaluation, and complex interventions. She has received funding for her research from diverse sources, including the Department for International Development, DFID, the ESRC, the Wellcome Trust, and the Gates Foundation. Our third and final presenter today is Professor John Ateguba. Professor John Ateguba is currently Associate Professor and the Director of the Health Economics Unit at the University of Cape Town School of Public Health and Family Medicine. He's the Deputy Executive Director in charge of capacity building for the African Health Economics and Policy Association. His research focuses on health financing, health inequality, equity in health, social determinants of health, health economics, methodology, and the economics of aging. He has received funding for his research from diverse sources, including the International Development Research Center, Rockefeller Foundation, and the National Research Foundation of South Africa, NRF. Erin, I'll pass it over to you now to get us started. Thank you all for being here today.
Okay, thank you very much, Angela. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you find yourselves. All right, so as Angela mentioned, I'm at McGill University, which is in Canada, and I've spent my entire post-PhD career here in Canada. So just to put my comments in context, they're definitely reflecting my experiences applying for grants in this context. So in terms of sort of general advice, I think making sure that you seek out a mentor for guidance specifically related to grants. So, figure out who in your department or faculty or your organization is good at getting grants, right? And they may not work specifically in your topic area. They may, so they might not work on exactly what you do, but writing grant proposals and getting grants is really a skill in and of itself. So try to find someone and ask them explicitly if they would mentor you in this area. I think also understanding that you're essentially engaging in an exercise of persuasion, right? That the document that you write has to be convincing. It has to draw the reader in the beginning, getting them to believe that, yes, this is an important problem and we don't know enough, convincing them that the work that you propose, the data you have available, the data you're going to collect, the analyses you're going to do is going to answer those questions, right? And that the knowledge that you produce as part of the research can be put to good use. That's all an exercise in persuasion, right? So it's not about having exactly the right data, exactly the right method. And so you might be, it's a different writing style in some sense, even than when we write our articles. So thinking about potentially investing in learning a little bit about persuasive writing or grant writing more specifically. And then I think also keeping in mind why you need grants in the first place, right? And it may be that in your context, you need that funding to conduct your research, that without the financing, you can't actually do the research you want to do. You may be in a position where you need to support students with master's and doctoral student stipends, whether or not they are actively involved with your research projects. You also may be in a position where you're required to get grant funding to cover your salary. Of course, that's quite a different situation. And I think in many places, success in getting grants is part of success in the tenure and promotion process. But again, the reason why you need these grants might shape the kinds of grants you go after, whether they're small or large. Where you apply for funding and how long you keep sort of resubmitting to the same organizations. So I think it's just helpful to keep in mind what you're actually trying to do and not just go after grants for the sake of going after grants, but really keep your goals in mind, as they might shape your strategies. So in terms of thinking about where to apply, so I mean, here in Canada, we have a national funding network. We have funding networks at the provincial level. We also have funders that may be outside of provincial government, but at the provincial level or at the local level, at the city level, we have potential grants available from the university or even the faculties within the university. So I think really doing some research to understand what's available to you besides just the big one that everybody thinks about, and using those smaller scale development grants that might be available from your faculty or university or from a research network as a stepping stone to larger grants. So first of all, having those smaller grants, not only will it strengthen your CV, and when your grants to the larger national funder are being reviewed, people will see that you have grants already on your CV. That's great, and can contribute to your success. And I think sometimes those small amounts of money actually let you get started on the research, right? They might let you hire a research assistant or collect some data, and that's substantive progress forward towards achieving your goals. Sometimes funders offer what I would call an open or a general funding call, where you can apply on any topic you want, and then they often also offer targeted funding opportunities. So this might be particular to COVID-19, to social inequalities in health, to maternal child health, right? They could be targeted in any number of areas. I think they're really worth considering. First of all, the success rates are often higher in these competitions than in the open calls. And if you don't work at all on maternal and child health, then maybe that's not the right funding call for you. But I think, keep an open mind, be creative. Sometimes your research agenda may not be a perfect fit, but you can adjust things slightly or frame things differently. So I'm not suggesting that, you go way off track and apply for things that don't apply, but just keep an open mind and consider whether those targeted funding opportunities might be worth pursuing. And then, again, depending on the structure of the funding environment where you are, in Canada, we have funders for the natural sciences, for sort of, mathematics, statistics, and the hard sciences. We also have social science funders, and then we have health funders. And so as a health economist, I'm, in theory, at least, eligible to apply both to the health funder and to the social science funder. So if you have that kind of double opportunity available to you, that might also be of interest. There's an asterisk there because in terms of understanding your audience, the norms and expectations might differ quite substantially across those health and social science funding agencies. So in my own context, the health funder in Canada, when people are reviewing those grants, they very much expect to see a relatively large research team that reflects interdisciplinarity. So you might have a health economist and some clinicians, some patients, some decision makers, some academics who are not economists, right? And if you just bring one or two health economists to a problem, it's almost a certain rejection. They also look for a mix of junior and senior members on the team to see that kind of mentorship is going on and that junior people are being brought into the fold. So talking again with your mentor about what the expectations are is really important, so that you write a proposal and put together a proposal that fits with those expectations. These two groups of funders in Canada have very different expectations about what they call knowledge translation. So not only how you communicate your results at the end of the project, but how you bring in knowledge from patients, from decision makers, from clinicians into the work from the beginning, potentially. So again, a social science funder doesn't really look for that in the same way at this point. And so that last point of engaging knowledge users and patient partners is very much sort of the cutting edge expectation among health funders in Canada, and less so in social science funding agencies. Every grant competition should have evaluation criteria that will be communicated to the reviewers of the proposals. And so I very much encourage you to seek those out and pay very close attention to them. You want to make it incredibly easy for a reviewer to read your proposal and understand exactly how you're addressing each of those criteria. So you can even structure your proposal so it's in the same order. You can use very similar or the same language to sort of signal to the reviewer that this is where I'm talking about the importance of the problem. This is where I'm talking about the methodology, right? And it may not be so different from how you would have structured your proposal anyway, but why not make it that much easier for the reviewer to find the information they're looking for and be able to assess very quickly and easily how your proposal addresses the criteria. I think more generally, make it easy for the reviewer. Understand that people generally do not sit down with a coffee and in a comfortable chair and spend the entire afternoon reading one research proposal. They're usually doing them relatively last minute. They have 10 or 12 or 15 of these to read at the same time. They're stressed in general, right? We're all busy. So just make it easy, make the formatting include some white space. If you have a very, very dense page where there's no white space, it's hard to read, it's hard to find information. And really make sure that your writing is clear, particularly the first page that really needs to grab the person's attention and convince them. So not only do you want feedback from your peers in your research area, but have a friend who's a non-academic, because again, another thing is that reviewers, it's rare that all the proposals they're going to review are directly in their topic area. So they may be reading about something they don't know very much about. So you want it to be clear even to someone who's outside of your area. And lastly, take advantage of or even work to create opportunities to serve as a reviewer or to sit as an observer on a review committee. And again, this could be at the national funding level. It could be at your own university where they're reviewing internal grants. It's incredibly illuminating to see the conversations in the room, to see how people have digested and reviewed and critiqued grant proposals. It's very, very, very helpful. So if those opportunities explicitly exist, do take advantage of them. And if you're not finding them, see if you can create an opportunity like that at a local level, maybe to start with. And then lastly, just in terms of process, I think getting critical feedback before you submit your proposal, obviously just like a journal article, you don't want the reviewer to be the first person who sees your proposal outside of you. And then, so as I mentioned just before, getting feedback from both experts in your area and also someone who's outside your field and maybe who's not an academic at all. And you really don't want to ask someone who you think will give it a cursory glance and say it's great, right? Someone who's either just too busy to really take the time, or just the person who's your cheerleader all the time, right? I can still remember my first grant. I gave it to my mentor, who I really thought was just the nicest person in the world. And it came back to me just covered in red edits, you know, and I was mortified and frustrated, but taking that advice made it a much, much better proposal. So you want the person who's going to take the time and give you the tough feedback, right? And really tell you where you can make it better. And then lastly, I would just say, you know, don't give up easily. First of all, it's very, very common to not get funded on the first round. So it's much more typical, at least in my environment, to get funded on the second or third rounds. I've even gotten funded on the fourth resubmission. So, you know, there's that sort of back and forth process that often has to happen. Take the peer review comments seriously, both in terms of when you do the revise and resubmit, just like you would for a journal article, continuing getting mentorship and guidance from your mentor. And then I also think, I mean, if it's a well-functioning grant committee, I hope that they're giving you, it's not always a clear message, but there's a message there. The message is either, we'd like to see this again, we think it can be better, please address these comments, make these changes and send it back. And every once in a while, you know, after the first or second submission, a committee will say, you know, we don't think this is ever going to work. Maybe you should, you know, either submit it elsewhere or put this down and think about something else. So the downside is they're rarely going to be that clear and that explicit, but just try to assess what the message is. I'm saying don't give up, but I'm not saying beat your head against the wall for something that's never going to get there. So if the message from the peer review committee is on this, you know, second or third time, we're not going to fund this project, like, be able to hear that. But if that's not the message and you are getting a message to please improve this, send it back, we want to see it again, then take that seriously as well and put in the effort to do that. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Next, we'll have Professor Hansen.
First. Okay, let me bring myself on first. Now I'm going to share my screen and see if that helps. Okay, so can you see my slides now? Okay, if you can't, then let me know.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to follow on. There's a few things that Erin said that made me smile while she was saying. So the first is, I'm actually Canadian and I grew up in Montreal, and I've spent my entire career outside of Montreal. So unlike her, who spent her career there, I'm here in the UK and I've been here for about 30 years now. And the other thing that made me smile when she was talking, it was about the red pen from the mentor on the grant proposal. And it reminded me of my first draft of my very first paper ever that came back with a big red pen job from Professor Anne Mills, who at one point started writing in the column. There's a particular structure that I use that she really didn't like, and she said, "You do this a lot," and so I've changed that way of writing based on that very excellent advice. So I'm going to start by jumping in about different types of funding. So I think that what Erin was talking about was mostly project grants. So I just want to say a little bit about fellowship grants, because these are slightly different. So, and those of you who are in the UK, and there are some kind of EU fellowship funders as well. The ones that I'm familiar with are the ones from the Wellcome Trust, or there used to be a Medical Research Council Skills Development Fellowship that was very much focused on, that had a focus on health economics. The UKRI Future Leaders Fellowships, I'll come back to them in a minute, but they're a very particular style of funding, and writing for them requires a very adapted style. There's all the research grants. So again, in the UK, the Economic and Social Research Council is a good source for these for health economics. Some of them are via some doctoral training programs for postdoc fellowships, for example. There's a nice new investigator grant from the ESRC that's, I think it's up to a maximum of £200,000 or £300,000. There's another one that I really love is the ESRC, the Secondary Data Analysis Initiative, which is a scheme that's particularly focused on getting people to analyze existing data sets. Their focus, at least in the second to fifth or so rounds, was on data sets that were generated through ESRC grants, the big UK panel data sets. But they have also now been open to proposals that involve looking at other data sets, and just think how much data is out there and how hard it is to get a grant to do data analysis. And that's a good source. There's another source of grant funding that can work for people who are early on in their careers, which is about doing economic evaluations within clinical trials. So it's not really a grant that you apply for, but more being part of a team that's applying for a grant. There can be a degree of ownership over the economic evaluation methods. So I won't talk very much about that. That can be a route in. And the last thing, I'm thinking particularly for those of you who are working in or on low and middle income countries, there are development programs and projects that often have research elements to it. So it's kind of either to do with your program evaluation or other types of research as part of a big implementing consortium that is funded by funders like what used to be called DFID, now the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, USAID, etc. So a little bit like Erin was talking about, know your funder. There's something also knowing how funding decisions are made. And most processes would have a structure a little bit like this. So first of all, there'll be an administrative review. So the people who administer the grant located in the grant body will make a first review to make sure the project fits the scheme. So, is it on a topic that's consistent with the scheme? Is the budget consistent with the scheme limits? And so you really want to make sure that you get through the admin review. That's kind of the first post to pass. And then there's a set of activities around peer review and decision making. And I think there's often in grant panels, you have to speak to both specialists and non-specialists. So on the Wellcome Trust panel that I have sat on for the last 4 years, the peer reviews, the external peer reviews will often be topic specialists, people who really know the subject, but the committee members who make the decisions on the basis of the reviews they receive are smart non-specialists. So being able to get the language right and speak to both audiences is often a real challenge. In some panels, the form of the panel will be that each proposal will be assigned to one or two presenters who will give their own review and assessment of the proposal to the broader committee. And they're kind of in between. Often it'll be the economist or the social scientist presenting it to a group of biomedical or medical scientists, for example. So you've got specialists, in-betweeners, and then non-specialists that you need to be speaking to. And then often there'll be some kind of voting or scoring process. So there's something about learning about the process for the funder that you are applying to. Fellowships are a very particular type of funding award because they're very much a personal award. So it's we in the School of Hygiene often describe these as being about the person, the project, and the place. And so when you're writing a fellowship application, and often there are fellowship schemes that are directed at early career researchers, you need to say why you and why this is the right stage of your career to be getting this fellowship. There's the project itself. So is the scope and the ambition of it appropriate for your career stage? Does it build on your past work, and will it enable you to strengthen your skills and move towards being an independent researcher? And then there's the place at which you're proposing to take up your fellowship. So why is this the right place? Does it have the right people and sort of mentors and supervisors? Does it have the right resources? Do you get access to training? And also thinking, you might have the opportunity to not just talk about your host institution, but other places that you might visit to bolster your skills and strengthen your networks. So the fellowship application is a sales pitch. Many fellowship awards now also have interviews. And so if there is an interview, really important to prepare carefully for that and get your colleagues to help you with mock interviews. Just a brief couple of words on research alongside development projects. So these projects can often be a great research opportunity. It could be sort of formative research that's helping to design an intervention, or it could be an intervention evaluation. And the big program grants may well require some research partners to be part of that team. I think the challenge here is, how do you make sure they don't get lost in consultancy and actually you're able to use them as part of your research output? And so the first element of that is actually moving beyond the reports to write the papers, and making sure that you write the papers. Another opportunity there is being able to use them as an opportunity to collect background data that can form the basis for a research application in the future. And so it's kind of a need to link up with implementers, sell your skills to them, and then think about how you work with them to design research within the broader program. I think there's two challenges in this type of research. One is that the implementers tend to see the research budget as really zero sum. So any more bit of money that's spent on research is less for implementation. So that can be frustrating and need negotiation. There are also potentially issues of independence and of conflict of interest. And last week I was chairing a panel session at the Health Systems Conference on amongst the editors of the major health policy and systems research journals on the topic of conflict of interest, and the need to be really clear, not just in communicating, but in designing research alongside projects, to make sure that there are appropriate firewalls so that you can make a credible case that your results are independent and objective, so that you're not perceived as having a conflict of interest. So I'll just say one more couple of things, which will come back at the end. So time, everyone's going to talk about time. I won't say any more about that. I think another issue is to make sure you use your peers. So it's to get reviews of your work. That can be senior colleagues. In my faculty, we have a formal review structure. So if your proposal is going to any one of our key funders, we require you to bring it to our workshops. And our workshops are designed to mimic funding panels. So it's a great way to get input and feedback on a full draft of a proposal. You want to be talking to the experts in your field. And sometimes you might have the opportunity to create an advisory group that both will give you good advice on your pre-award stage, but also might then advise you on how the work is going as it progresses. And the last kind of thing to think about is whether you can get the experts in your department or your faculty to share their knowledge. People love to be asked to share their knowledge. So there's definitely potential to have, to ask people, so for early career researchers to put together seminars for early career researchers that draw on the expertise in the department, the people who are really good at getting grants. And I think these slides will come up in the recording, and maybe they might be able to just pull out these resources. But I really liked this Parker Derriting stuff. It's quite interesting about ways to write the case for support that might be useful to some of you. Okay, so I am done. Thank you.
Thanks, Kara. Finally, we have Professor John Ataguba.
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that is nice for me is when you go last, everyone has said all you need to say. All you need to do is just reiterate. I like the structure, the way it started by first talking about project type kind of funding in the context of Canada, and also moving further to talk about the different types of funding opportunities that may be out there. So what is left for me is now to add aesthetics to it. So I will just focus on key pointers for you. This has been said earlier to, as much as possible, get mentors to assist. And when you get mentors, there are many questions that you need to answer. Some of them have been answered when Erin was talking, and also Kara. Why do you really need a grant? And what type of grant should you apply for, and at what level? We all have our own trajectories. In many low middle income countries, it's a different picture to what you see in developed countries, likely because the so-called gradient also applies. I like what Kara talked about in terms of having a panel, trying to mimic as much as possible the review panel at their institutions. Unfortunately, many low middle income countries don't have the ability to do that. And of course, that translates to how much resources they're able to get into their institutions. And also, where can you find information about the various options that you have that might suit you? These are things that when you start out, usually useful to gather. Some universities and research organizations where you work have dedicated research offices where many of these information can be accessed. All you need to do is contact whoever is in charge. Or if you belong to very large mailing groups, there are some mailing groups where they pass around different funding opportunities. So it's important, like it has been said, to, as much as possible, read criteria and conditions of the grant very carefully. The reason why I say this is that sometimes some grants may be rejected, not because it's not good science, but because it's not perfect fit. So don't take every rejection as something to do with rejecting your own scientific contribution, but it could be something that is not in line with what the funders want to see. Erin talked about, in the case of Canada, where you have funding that may go for the Social Science Council or the Health Council. So if you targeting, for example, in that regard, the Social Science Council, and you rely heavily on the health component, you might be shooting yourself in the foot, for example. I like aiming high. Try it. I mean, if you don't try, you never get it. So you never, no grant is won by thinking that could have applied. You could have applied, but never get a grant, but try it and get rejected. Then you could really say you tried. So don't be afraid to try. So long as, like I said, you meet the criteria, just try. But learn to walk before flying. So if it's something that you want to start out by getting a seed grant, it could be as little as $10,000 or $20,000. I started with something pretty much like that over 15 years ago, just getting more like a seed grant. And that really helped in terms of opening up your eyes to possibilities. Or you might take early career fellowships. Many of them abound. The Wellcome Trust is an example. Kara talked about that. It's also important to attend seminars and workshops about grant writing. The beauty of it now is that many of these things are online. If you Google today, I'm pretty sure you will find many of the seminars, and one of them is what we're doing now. So this is going to go down in history, and you can also come back to take a look at them. Peer review has been highlighted several times. Peer review is very important. Not when we talk about peer here, it also goes beyond people who are knowledgeable in your field, or to include people who have diverse skills, because what you're trying to aim at here is you're selling yourself. It's a pitch. Kara talked about a sales pitch. It's just a pitch. So you must be able to go through the pitch successfully. If you need help, that has not been mentioned, but budgeting is something very, very important. Kara talked about it in terms of the funders trying to ensure also that when you look at your proposal, that the budget is in line with what they can offer you. So it's important to seek help with budgeting. For example, not so good at budgeting things. So it's important to get someone who can help you do that very well. You mustn't be an expert everywhere. It's okay. Ensure harmony between your budget and the scientific proposal. If you say you want to spend a certain amount on human resource, and then the level of effort that the human resource will put in does not match that, it's problematic. It's also important to choose your collaborators well. This is where low and middle income researchers need to pay attention to. We've learned a lot in terms of the art of getting this is heavily correlated with the amount of resources the institution has. So if you want them to be successful, it's also good to associate yourself with successful people and learn the art. The whole idea is learn the art, and then you will be able to learn to fly with time. So include mentors from all around, cover the breadth of the proposed research. If it's something that has to do with both health and humanities or communication, for example, it's good to bring in everyone on board and people who have experience and can deliver the job. It's very important. Do not leave things to the last minute. We all do sometimes. Like I used to have a professor then who used to tell me that no matter how often you postpone an exam, students will always wait till the last day to get themselves ready. They never get themselves ready 2-3 months before the exam. So something we kind of learned growing up. So let's avoid that if you're really planning to get a very good grant. If there is a template, use it. It helps. Many of the funders provide templates where you can adapt, making life easier for you. And if possible, they put out examples of winning proposals that you can use to mimic your own proposals. Not verbatim, but at least they help. Because this is a pitch, it's important to get it right. It's like going to pitch an idea to someone, and the idea itself is good, but the way the message is being conveyed is not good. So the fact that you have good science, but it's not communicated well, can lead to rejection. So not rejecting the science, but the way it is put. It's very important to pay attention to that. And it's good to deal with unsuccessful applications. I highlighted that there might be many reasons why applications are rejected. One is that it's not a fit for that application, or it may be because the science is bad. So getting help from reviewers with comments can help you, even if you decide to put it out elsewhere. It's good to keep in mind your audience a lot. Your audience, and also Kara mentioned that in the sense that your audience may not be entirely knowledgeable. Now your audience, in this case, if you're pitching for a fund, are knowledgeable, but they may have different skills and different disciplines. So it's important to appeal to everyone as much as possible. And that means your use of language, you should avoid jargon as much as possible. Because grant applications may target many audiences, like I said, while some specific reviewers might be technical in your own area, but the college of reviewers or assessors may be multidisciplinary, and they'll be struggling to understand when you begin to mention things or try to put down a certain discipline. I know growing up, studying economists, some can be very rude and will try to project themselves as the best quantitative researchers and overlook sociologists. You'll be in deep trouble if a sociologist is sitting on that panel and you write something of this nature. The chances are that you'll be thrown out. So it's important to also write in a persuasive way, but anticipate, like I said, audience by avoiding jargon. It's good to contrast this with academic writing, because with academic writing, you know the journal you're writing to. Most likely people who read the journal would be health economists, health systems researchers, health science researchers, or health policy researchers. But with grants, the reviewers may not be knowledgeable in that area. And lastly, I got the grant, hooray. So what next? These are just things that I want you to think about. Issues around contract signing, ethics clearance, don't undermine them. They also form part of your grant. Think ahead. It's also good to begin to organize yourself to get the work done, comply with reporting standards, and then, of course, move away from convincing the reader to explaining your research. With applying for grants, you're trying to convince the reader, but when you want to publish the paper, you're not necessarily convincing your reader per se, but you want to explain your research to the broader community of researchers out there. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks to all our wonderful presenters for very good pointers. We have one slide that's a cheat sheet prepared that hopefully you will find handy. I will share my screen shortly. It should be available for you to download on the website as well once we publish the slides and the recording from this seminar. Okay, so we'll move. These are the 10 tips our presenters have graced for us as takeaways. The hope is that we can and put it on our walls for when we get to working on our grants. This, as I said, will be available for us to leverage when we get in our grants. We will move to the question and answer session now. The chat room. So I will proceed to read them. Our first question is from K. Lim. To all the panelists, I have a question on the grant application strategy. I understand that few funders fund methodological work. So health economists will need to find specific disease, health areas to apply the methods on. Am I right to think that this means we have to work or focus on different area, that's a disease or health area, every other grant application? And potentially the first grant may not be a primary area of interest. Is it better to focus on one specific area from the first grant onwards, or is there a middle ground?
Do you want me to start, Angela? So I think that's a great question, because I think it so not all health economics research is disease specific, right? There's lots of questions that you know, about healthcare markets or about health equity and health status that may not be disease specific. But it is the case that if you're that there are often opportunities to do methodological work on economic evaluations alongside clinical interventions, and so then you really do have to learn the language and learn about the disease. And so it's really nice if you are if that's your area, it's nice to develop some expertise there so that you can have ways of communicating with the clinicians and the epidemiologists who are working on the broader project area. You're right, you don't want to work on a different disease for every project, because then you don't, it takes a lot of time. It's an investment really in a new area. And so to become a specialist in in a restricted disease area, in the economics of a disease area, is quite a good strategy. So my disease for when I first started working in health economics was malaria, and I worked in malaria for probably 10 or 15 years on things that I only ever did one economic evaluation, really. I've worked with others and supported others, but I also worked on lots of other issues to do with the delivery of malaria interventions. And it really did help to be able to speak to the malaria people. So I think I'm probably on the middle ground position, that it's useful to develop some expertise in a disease area if that's going to bring you the links to the trialists and the trial money. But not all health economics is disease specific, and you won't necessarily be lucky enough to have a whole career around a single disease.
Thanks, Cara. John and Erin,
I'll jump in to say that my career has not been very disease specific either. My work is not so much around economic evaluation, but the evaluation of policy and clinical interventions in the real world setting. I mean, a lot of my work was in primary care. I echo Kara's points in the sense that whether it's by developing the knowledge base yourself, or probably also building that team of experts, right? That you have some clinicians on your team, some disease experts on your team, so you're able to make the proposal speak to the topic area, but you also have to make a strong argument that the methodological work you want to do is important in that area. It's not just I'm going to apply this method to this setting. There has to be a reason. It has to be motivated, right? And that might come from your interactions and learn with people who work in that disease area or clinical setting, and looking at the research in that area and understanding what the gaps are.
Yeah, thanks. I would also add my voice to it. Yeah, basically, it's true that all health economists are not, all health economists don't have to be disease kind of focused. I personally don't focus on any disease, and I don't know that I will in the nearest future. So what matters, I would argue, is that you tie in all your research to have one theme. Even if you decide to do malaria today, tomorrow you're on TB, or you are on HIV/AIDS, there has to be a theme that runs through in many cases. What many researchers run into is just spreading themselves out there the moment they find the funding opportunity. Yes, you can find that funding opportunity, and Erin rightly said that you can bring it into your court. So you basically bring it in and make it yours. So that ability is something that you would also want to learn growing up. So yes, it is important to have a focus. The focus mustn't be disease. It might be, like you said, financing health services, or it might be economic evaluation of health programs, whichever the program is, but you only focusing on evaluating programs, if that helps.
Wonderful, thank you all. Our second question is from James Buchanan. I'm in the UK, and the main sources of personal funding are fairly well signposted. Example, fellowships via NIHR, MRC, welcome. What I'm struggling with are the smaller pots of money for seed funding or pump priming. What options are there that I might have missed, both UK and internationally?
Shall I start from the UK perspective? So, James, you're right. The small pots of money can be incredibly valuable and hard to find. They're often in the UK, in northern institutions, sometimes the universities themselves are a source of that small amounts of funding. And so, for example, so you're at DPH in Oxford. I bet Oxford gets a mountain of Wellcome Trust funding, and they probably get what's called strategic fund funding from the Wellcome Trust that the institution then is able to give out. And that's what happens to us in London, and we do that, and we have an annual competition for small grants to a maximum of 10 or 15,000 pounds, deliberately framed as pump priming. So, so I think look inside first to see if there are small pockets of money that are competitively awarded within your organisation. I think there's similarly in UK universities have had pots of GCRF funding as well for international development oriented work. But the really small grants, they're often sometimes they're grants to organize conferences or seminars. That's another, so places like Leverhulme or might have small pots of money for that purpose. The Wellcome Trust has a small grants program for organizing things like that as well. But you're right, it can be hard to find.
And I might just add on to that. I mean, sometimes it's not always obvious how you would use a small grant to organize a conference like for your larger, but I mean, your larger goals and research agenda. But I see there's a question later in the chat about connecting with people who don't always go to the same seminars or meetings. I mean, if you're interested in a topic, you could, you know, again, if those small grants are available to put together a seminar, you could do something like that, bring people together who don't normally get together. They have a chance to meet, get to know each other, know about each other's work. And then a follow-up email about, you know, I'm thinking about putting together a grant application. Would you be, you know, that it makes a lot more sense than just coming out of the blue and you've already had a chance to get to know about what each other's work is. And obviously it's both less and more complicated in this era where everything is online, but I think that's an interesting way to think about making connections as well.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah. Let me also add that there might also be another kind of grant, which is a travel grant, which you may kind of tap into. Now, the beauty of that for many, well, since you're talking of the UK, is that it gives you the opportunity to maybe travel to Asia or Africa or the Middle East or wherever to make connections. So in a way, it's like we usually say you use money to make money. So you use that as an opportunity to begin to create a network of researchers that would bid for those large grants you're talking about. So maybe there are in your institution that you want to really explore. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Our next question is from Amrit Banstola. And the question is for John and Erin. I like the idea of getting critical feedback from other mentors while preparing an application. The challenge, however, is finding people who could provide feedback and comments to the application when you are particularly from LMIC. Are there any opportunities or groups we would approach for?
Can I take the first stab there? This is a this is a question we get asked very often, even within Africa. Let's talk about the African Health Economics and Policy Association. We've learned over the years that many of the applications, whether for conferences, grants, and papers, tend to be of low quality. And that has a lot to do with many of the lead researchers not having time, either busy with consultancies or because there are fewer of them, they're just swamped here and left, right, and center with many activities, and as such are unable to provide feedback. What we think might be a good model going forward is to have more like community of researchers who would be willing to help each other. I think for me, that would be a good way to start. And if possible, using platforms like iHea or whichever organization in different countries to seek out help directly from the organizations for help. Please, we're crying help. And perhaps there will be very useful engagements to deal with this, because this is a serious issue in low and middle income countries. This is spot on. The challenge is real. People struggle. Even with papers to get a mentor to read through. I was lucky growing up in my career to have people who were really willing to put aside things to mentor me. Well, one Di is here, which I will always say every day. I know she might not agree, but yeah, well, she was one, in addition to the late Gavin Mooney, who were really, really there to help every time I call and knock. And so such kind of support, if you don't get them in many low middle income countries, can really be hard. I share in your pains. Thanks.
Yeah, so I
Thanks,
was thinking
Sharon.
also, sorry, Angela, go ahead.
No, I was just acknowledging the comment. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to highlight maybe iHea's efforts to put together a mentorship network. I like that idea, John, of a little bit more of a community, because again, you don't always need it to be a senior colleague in your field to read your grant. It could be a peer who is in your field. It could be, a colleague who's not a health economist, because again, you need the non-specialist to be able to understand it as well. And, even again, a friend, a family member who's not an academic or a researcher, that's not the only kind of review that you want, but if that's better than nothing for sure, to make the content understandable and readable. So I think we have work to do as a community to continue to build those the networks and make sure the resources are available to people around the world. But don't forget to think about who's around you. The person who reads it doesn't need to be a health economist necessarily.
Great. We have one final question from Florence Lucre. Erin touched on this earlier. I'm wondering if there are the other panelists have additional suggestions as well. The question was, do you have other suggestions on how we can connect with academic physician researchers for collaborative purposes? I have found that it's rare for the two groups to go to the same seminar or meetings.
So that's a great question. So one of the things that we have found is that we've been enormously helped by some of the funders of the big clinical trials, who now are saying, you need to have some economics in this, and you need to have some kind of health services research in this. And that creates the demand from the clinical types to bring in a broader set of disciplines into their work. And so then it's just kind of partly an issue then of making it known that you have those skills, and making sure that the people who are applying for those sorts of grants from those sorts of funders know that you could bring those things to their team. It's a real change, I think, in the landscape where, so previously you might do like a really long, big trial, find out that something's really effective, and then think, oh God, we should really have done an economic evaluation as well to see if it's cost effective. Can you do one for us now? And the answer is often not a very good one. So I think the funders are helping with that. And that's when, that kind of marketing yourself around, making sure people are aware what skills you have is a good start.
Can I a quick one? I know we're just on time. What we learned, what we do is to possibly present seminars at the Department of Medicine or orthopedics, whatever it is. You present seminars so that they get to know what you do. You may not be able to meet at iHea or elsewhere, but you will be able to do that within your institution or even within the country, and get out as an economist and book a seminar to present to physicians, and then they get to see what you do. But the demand becomes overwhelming. We've learned over the years that many of these research activities are primarily economic evaluation. But keep in mind, your audience can also be communication experts, can also be other social scientists, political scientists, etc. So don't just focus on physicians. That's my last word. Thanks.
And I was just going to add,
Wonderful.
I think Kara said earlier, people love being asked for their expertise. Physicians love it more than anybody, right? If you know someone, again, maybe in your institution who's working in a particular area, writing them an email and saying, oh, I'm interested in that, would you share your enormous amounts of knowledge with me? I mean, so that's another point of
Flattery
entry.
can get you a long way, right? Oh, I really love your work.
Well, no, anyway, of course, and you don't want to send that sort of stereotypical.
You don't want to be a sycophant.
Spam email. No. But again, physicians really feel like they have a lot of expertise and they like being asked about it. So anyway.
It looks like we have one final question. I will ask that quickly people can spare maybe another 5 minutes so we wrap up quickly. This is from Kate Lem. Do you have any suggestion on how to make ourselves known, market ourselves? Think of is to start within my own circle. We'll build my name, then slowly expand out, but this would take time. Is there quicker or more directly? I think a lot of that was just addressed, but if there are any additional thoughts, that would be welcome.
That's the best
I would
way.
just say maybe, presenting at a seminar in a clinical research department or grand rounds or something like that. At least that lets you speak to many, many people at the same time.
Yeah, and the really good relationships are made slowly, the really important ones. And so there's merit, I think, to start slowly within your circle, build a name for yourself, for a reputation for really good work, and things do follow from that.
Wonderful.
And also to add,
thank you.
I see.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I see. Is there a quicker? It's like this. It's like you're discounting things. You want them now. Just want them now. That's one of the problems researchers face. You want to get there, but take it easy. Build a career rather than build a name directly. You build a career, then the name would come. So look for ways to make substantive input rather than looking for which is the quickest way out. Okay, I need that way. Then basically doing it for yourself rather than trying to either have a discipline or so it's good as much as possible to have an area and reach out to people, but more importantly, build yourself. It's important. It takes time, but you get there.
Thank you all for joining us today, especially to our panelists for taking the time to share good pointers, to answer our questions. Thank you. The recording will be available as well as the slide deck. We included that last slide as well as the cheat sheet that you can print out and have readily available as a reminder for the key points when you get to work. Thanks again and have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.